Okay, well then that leads us to the third and final of these very heady, I realize, dry lectures on Stoic unitas, Tertullian's unitas trinitatis, and now Cyprian of Carthage, Cyprian's unitas catholicae, ecclesiae, or ecclesiae catholicae, oneness/unity, not of the Catholic Church. Remember from our New Testament readings and lecture sessions, rather the oneness/unity of the worldwide political assembly, also known as the Catholic Church. Okay. Cyprian of Carthage. Carthage, as in, once again, kind of like Tertullian, North Africa, and like Tertullian, of Carthaginian, Punic, Phoenician ancestry, although also, like Tertullian in all of these respects, himself a Roman citizen, and an orator, O-R-A-T-O-R, in the Roman legal system. So more of a lawyer than a jurist or a jurist like Tertullian. Tertullian was more of a jurist, justice. Cyprian was more of a lawyer. And his life's biography we know very, very well because of his own writings, the bulk of which are in his epistles or letters, correspondence with other Christian leaders in the entire Roman Empire, the entire Mediterranean basin, in the middle of the 3rd century. We have letters of Cyprian of Carthage, correspondence between Cyprian and Christian priests and bishops from Spain, elsewhere in North Africa, Asia Minor, modern-day Turkey, Greece, Italy, and France. So just from an historical standpoint, and looking at Christianity as an historical phenomenon, regardless of theological issues, doctrines, debates, or otherwise religious matters, but just as an historical document, he's extremely important for documenting Rome, the greater Roman Empire, and of course, this group called Christians within that Roman Empire at the time, middle of the 3rd century. Cyprian was born already into an affluent family. He was of patrician class, so a nobleman, somewhere around the year 200. We know exactly when he died. He died on September 14th in the year 258. He was executed by being beheaded, decapitated, to which we'll come in the next lecture session regarding the ancient Roman supplications versus persecutions of Christians. So Cyprian, already established in the, again, Roman bureaucratic legal system in North Africa, in the capital of the province of North Africa, Carthage, decided that he also, like Tertullian before him, wanted to become a member of this illegal religion somewhere around the year 246. He becomes a Christian. And only 2 years later, he is immediately, by the Christians, that is the Christian community in Carthage, elects him, selects him, makes him their own episkopos or episcopus, overseer, bishop. Again, remember our analysis of the first letter of Paul to the Corinthians, chapter 15, right? The bishop of the local worldwide political assembly of Christ, in this case in Carthage. So the bishop of Carthage in the year 248. And that will begin a flurry of writings, epistles, as well as other writings of Cyprian at the time, expounding upon the Christian doctrine and most especially its ecclesiology. Again, we already learned this word when we looked at the New Testament. Ecclesiology, that is the logical, rational, principle, reason behind the structure of this ecclesia, political assembly, catholica, worldwide, right? The Catholic Church. So after Paul, it will be Cyprian who provides the first and much, much, much more developed exposition of the structure of the Catholic Church. And he does so relying heavily and pretty much exclusively on the Stoic concept of unitas and Tertullian's further development of that. That is the unitas trinitatis, the oneness/unity of the Trinity. Remember, for the Christians, Tertullian, Trinity, the oneness of the Trinity, that is God. And that is the be-all and end-all of everything. That is human destiny, because that very same monotheistic God, the oneness/unity of the Trinity, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, has become human, is incarnate. As above, so below. Everything on earth must reflect everything beyond. Everything in the metaphysical, the heavens. As above, so below. And consequently, Cyprian's 6-point definition for the oneness/unity of this worldwide political assembly, the unity of the Catholic Church, builds on the previous two. Point number one for Cyprian. This Catholic Church, this worldwide political assembly, and its oneness/unity is not, take a guess, is not a plurality, which once again, kind of like Tertullian, point number one, should appear to be a contradiction, right? Because why? Because this Catholic Church thing is comprised of many members, a plurality, right? Ha ha ha. Like Tertullian, point number two, while each member of the ecclesia catholica is unus, unus, one alone, quantitative, numerical, identifiable in that sense. Together, all members together are unum, one thing only. There's oneness/unity of the Catholic Church, this worldwide political assembly. Point number three. Like Tertullian before, we said Tertullian suggests that the Trinity, the oneness/unity of the Trinity, is its own sacrament of the economy, entry point into the system. That is, the Trinity itself is its own, guarantees its own entrance into and system itself, the way it stays together. Notwithstanding, it's not a composite, etc., etc. Okay. As above, so below. Everything below must reflect what is above. And consequently, Cyprian, his point three, is that the sacramentum oikonomiae of this Catholic Church thing, oneness of this worldwide political assembly, the entry point into its system is identical with the sacramentum baptismali, which we already spoke about with Tertullian. That is the entry point of baptism. Just as this Jesus character, second person of the Trinity, Son, became human, the divine becomes incarnate, the oneness/unity of the Trinity is now human. Just as Jesus did that through baptism in the Jordan River, right? Buried underwater, That is exactly how, therefore, because of the divine incarnation, every other human being goes through this and consequently becomes a member of the Catholic Church, becomes one, identical in and with the Catholic Church through the entry point of baptism, the sacrament of baptism. That's how one gets into this terrestrial, earthly manifestation here below of the oneness of the Trinity above. That's how it happened the first time with the second person of the Trinity, Jesus Christ. And that's how it happens forever after until Jesus Christ returns. He's been away for a couple of millennia, and we don't expect him back anytime soon. Okay. Point number 4 for Cyprian. Also, there's a point 4a and a point 4b. Point 4a, Tertullian introduced the concept of origo, the origin within this system of the oneness of the Trinity. Same thing with Tertullian. What is the origin? He uses the term origo of this worldwide political assembly, Catholic Church. Well, whose worldwide political assembly is it? As we discussed in the New Testament readings, Jesus Christ's. And therefore, Jesus Christ is the origin, the divine now incarnate, is the origin of the Catholic Church. Cyprian also adds another term. You'll love this, considering our previous lecture sessions, and it's in our emphasis on ratio, R-A-T-I-O. Jesus Christ is the origin and the logical, rational principle or reason of this oneness / unity of the worldwide political assembly, Catholic Church, which is his in the first place. So it stands to reason that he is the reason, not to mention origo, origin of this. Okay, but Jesus, 40 days after he rose from the dead, he booked it on out of here, the ascension, right? And he said, we'll see you soon. Of course, again, kairos, soon, in eternity is a relative term. Okay. So what does he do? Again, going back to the New Testament, Gospel of Matthew, chapter 16, remember that? The keys, the vicar. Cyprian says, point 4b, that Peter, rock, is the origo, and he introduces another term, exordium. So the origin and exordium. This is interesting. Exordium in Latin means a starting point, kind of like the center of a spider's web. Or maybe better not to draw bizarre conclusions on that, given the context of what we're talking about. Spider web, Catholic Church. Ooh. Imagine throwing a pebble into a pond. You have a ripple effect, right? Okay, so Peter, like Jesus Christ, is also the origo, origin, and exordium, E-X-O-R-D-I-U-M, exordium, starting point, beginning point. It kind of spirals out, ripples out, of this worldwide political assembly of Christ. And how is this possible, Cyprian says? Because of that mechanism of vicarius we've also already spoken about in the New Testament, the vicar of Christ, the one that stands in the place of Christ, Jesus Christ, the King, until the King returns here in this terrestrial plane of existence. And therefore, that's how the holder of this title and office, rock, Peter, is also the origo. Notice Cyprian is careful not to say ratio principle, logical rational principle, because that could only be Christ. but the starting point anyway on earth for that. Okay. Point number 5 for Cyprian. It's the same exact idea for the Stoics with basic unitas, for Tertullian with his unitas trinitatis, oneness/unity of the Trinity. Same idea for Cyprian with his oneness/unity of the Catholic Church, the worldwide political assembly of Christ. That is to say, everything that exists comes from, contains in itself, reflects, if you will, and ultimately returns to this. That is oneness, the oneness of the Trinity, and that Trinity's worldwide political assembly, thanks to its incarnation in the second person, the Son, Jesus Christ. The interesting thing is that Cyprian describes this, lifting descriptions, lifting analogies really from Tertullian himself when Tertullian tries to describe how all this stuff works with the Trinity. Cyprian applies the same descriptions, the same allegory, metaphors to the Catholic Church itself, using, very conveniently, our very 3 human needs that we said accrue a great deal of religious symbolism: water, sun, and tree. So, for example, Cyprian describes the Church, the Catholic Church. How does all this work? Taking it from Tertullian's description of the Trinity. Let's say water to begin with, right? Well, let's say there's a water fountain, foams, origin, source, that eventually becomes a spring, a river, and eventually empties into an ocean. All contiguous and continuous. But we make distinctions. There's a spring, a source, an origin, a river, and an ocean without interruption. So it's all water, kind of the same water, right? But it's different. The sun. Well, there's the sun. The sun shines. You have a ray, and eventually that ray hits a point on the surface of some physical material object that has an apex. It's all sun, all photons, but we still make distinctions: sun, ray, apex. Okay. Finally, the tree. We have a root, you have a trunk, and you have branches. A root is not going to directly produce fruit. That's from the branch. However, at the same time, they're all inextricably connected, none the while being distinct. Okay. The final point, number 6 here for Cyprian. And this is very interesting. Remember, this is a human endeavor, this Catholic Church thing, this worldwide political assembly of Christ thing. Even though, as above, so below, it is reflecting the Trinity, what's above, even though it is supposedly itself the earthly, terrestrial manifestation of the oneness/unity of the Trinity, the oneness/unity of the worldwide political assembly of Christ, the Catholic Church. Cyprian's not stupid. It's a work in progress. And that's not a cop-out or a way to kind of circumvent the inherent problem here. Again, remember those 2 temporal concepts of chronos, measurable time, and kairos, time outside of time of the moment. This is an ongoing process necessarily because it's the eternal meeting, conflicting with, interacting with the temporal here in this plane of existence. So it's an ongoing process. And consequently, Tertullian sustains those previous 2.6s from the Stoics' basic concept of unitas in itself, tension, as well as Tertullian's Trinitarian point number 6, dilectio agape, self-sacrificial, eternally pouring out oneself for the other. But again, this is human endeavor. And consequently, Cyprian says, point number 6, there are two things that are essential to this plane of existences bearing all of this out. Namely, caritas in Greek, caritas, or in English, charity, and fraternal concord or agreement, fellowship. Charity and fellowship. Because this, here and now, this worldwide political assembly of Christ, this Catholic Church thing, it will be as effective as it reflects, as it lives all of this. This being not ideals, but this reality. Presumes a lot, once again, kind of like the ancient Roman constitutional republic. So, fellowship, fraternal concord. Kind of like the 1992 Rodney King, can't we all just get along? So, fellowship, fraternal concord, it presumes a lot. Moreover, this thing called charity, which unfortunately in not just English, but most modern languages, is just taken for granted to kind of be love. Right? Charity. Is charity love? We'll come back to that in a few lecture sessions from now when we look at the 4th century. Okay, for now we're still stuck on the 3rd. In any event, that then, a very, very collapsed, brief, but accurate, is the development of this concept of oneness/unity. We also suggested that that in itself looked like it could become the blueprint for a monotheistic religion, which is exactly what we just saw previously with Tertullian. That's exactly what happened. Thirdly, and finally, with Cyprian, an ecclesiology, a logical, rational principle structure for this worldwide political assembly. We've suddenly moved way beyond a blueprint for a monotheistic religion. If we revisit Cyprian now, he's given us a blueprint for what some could interpret to be an alternative model of government, or a state within a pre-existing state, a state within a state. That sounds like a recipe for disaster. A coup d'etat. Revolution. And that indeed is what happens throughout the Roman Empire in the 3rd century. The Romans finally wake up and realize, oh, the gods, we have now, with this illegal religious cult, we have the makings of a state within a state. And that brings us to the Roman supplications and persecutions of the Christians.